So let's start on the sportsbook side of things. First base is a run line or money line bet that you like. Matt, where are you going for this one?
I feel like I'm stealing Erik's pick here, potentially with the Angels, because he's been a big fan of Patrick Sandoval for the last couple of weeks. But that's the bet that I think is the most appealing. So I don't think Sandoval is a great pitcher. I think he's a solid one. And he's benefited in large part from a pretty easy schedule. The last two starts out, he's had tougher matchups with the new look A's and with the Dodgers, but he actually fared kind of well in those matchups. But this is more about Zach Greinke just not being that good of a pitcher at this point in his career. And the Astros are not at full strength lineup wise. Alex Bregman's still out. The back end of that order is just not very good. So I kind of think the Angels should be favored against the Astros at home with Sandoval going against Greinke with the pitching advantage. My one concern here is if Shohei Ohtani doesn't play because he started last night's game. So he got a few at bats and was the starting pitcher. If they give him the night off, then that would change things for sure. But as long as Ohtani plays, I think the Angels are in an undervalued spot for this game.
Erik, did Matt steal your pick?
Well, I'm glad to see my Patrick Sandoval love is getting noticed. That was actually my second favorite bet on the slate, so I'm fully on board with Matt on that one. But it's slightly behind the Rangers plus 145 over the Athletics. The Rangers, they can't hit. That's true. They do have the worst lineup here. That's why they're the underdogs. But plus 145, I think, is too long odds given the gap between the two pitchers. I think Dane Dunning, I don't like him as much as I like Patrick Sandoval, but there's something there with him. 4.07 ERA, but most of the ERA estimators have him close to a half run better than that. Just a hair under league average in his strikeout rate and right about league average in his walk rate, which is nothing special. But when you combine that with a 55.7% ground ball rate, that is a way to be a successful mid-rotation starter in this league. And I think he should be able to do that in most of his outings. He's got a 2.70 ERA over his last 6 starts, so things have been working out pretty well for him lately. Cole Irvin, on the other hand, has a 3.45 ERA, but he's gotten there through a formula that basically doesn't work at a sustainable way in the major leagues. Most of the ERA estimators have him well over a run worse than that. He doesn't walk anybody, just a 4.4% walk rate, but that's kind of all he does. His strikeout rate of 17.4% is well below league average, which you can make work if you keep the ball on the ground, but he doesn't do that either. He's actually a fly ball pitcher with a ground ball rate of just 35.9%. So given how much more I like Dunning than Irving, I think that makes the Rangers my favorite upset, just slightly ahead of the Angels here.
All right, Paul, what about you? A run line or money line bet that you like on today's slate?
I'll give you 2 on the money line, and it's because of the pitching matchups in both cases. I'll take the Tigers at home over the Indians at plus 100 on the strength of their 7-3 record over the last 10. Cleveland is 3-7. Zach Plesac has had trouble serving up the long ball lately. 13 allowed in his last 57 innings pitched. He got roughed up by the Tigers in his last start, allowing 5 runs, 4 of them earned in only 4 innings. Meanwhile, Tyler Alexander is getting stretched out over his last 5 appearances, 4 of which have been pretty decent, especially his last one, where he blanked the Indians 5 1/3 innings while striking out 4 and not walking a batter. In my second pick, I've been bashing the D-backs all year, so I'm going to be nice to D-backs fans today and throw them a bone, saying I'll take them to get another bite out of the Padres after the beatdown they laid on them last night. That's 2 straight lopsided losses for the visitors, and they'll face Madison Bumgarner, who's looked the vintage version of himself over the last 5 starts that he's made, allowing a total of 10 earned runs over his last 39 innings pitched, striking out 20 and walking 4. Meanwhile, his mound opponent Blake Snell has had a serious issue with control over his last 10 starts, walking 30 and allowing 45 hits for a whip of 152. Take the home side for plus 145.
All right, Paul, second base is going to be a game total that you're targeting. So where are you going to be looking for this one?
Again, I'm looking at a pitcher's duel, and it's in Seattle tonight. Robbie Ray and Chris Flexen. They're 2 of the best pitchers going right now, and these 2 teams are in contention for the wild card. So they've both been solid over the last several starts, and they're facing off in a pitcher's-friendly park. So I like the under at 8.5 over here. Then the Red Sox will arrive at Fenway in ill humor after dropping 2 of 3 against the Rays. I think they'll run up the score against struggling old starter Spencer Watkins, who limps into this one after being roughed up in his last 3 outings, where he's been touched for 13 runs and only 15 and 2/3 inning pitched. Take the over of 11 runs because the Sox starter has only 1 quality start in his last 5 outings himself.
All right, Erik, how about you? A game total that you're targeting?
Yeah, I'm looking at Atlanta, Washington to go under 9 runs. Both teams haven't hit much since the deadline. Atlanta's actually been worse, 23rd by WRC plus compared to 19th for Washington, but I would expect Washington to be worse than that going forward, given that they got rid of some pieces, most notably Trey Turner. But and then the two pitchers, I like both of them tonight. Charlie Morton is nearly twice as old as his opponent here, Josiah Gray. Maybe not quite, but he's been in the league about 18 times as long. But he's been as good as ever this year. 3.52 ERA is well supported by his peripherals, striking out nearly 28% of opposing batters while still keeping his above average ground ball rate. He'd started to fall off a bit in recent years, but I think he's back to the way he's been in his late 30s peak here. Then Josiah Gray on the other side, not proven at all. I think he's made just 4 major league appearances, but he's shown something in there. 4 ERA is fine. Walking too many guys, can't keep the ball on the ground, but he's striking out 32.1% of opposing batters when you're already whiffing nearly a third of batters at the highest level this early in your career. I think that is a great sign for how good your stuff is. He struck out a ton of guys in the minors too and didn't have the same walk issues and didn't have a shockingly low ground ball rate, which is just 23.8% right now. So I would expect that skill set to lead to a successful career for him. I think he was a very good get in that Max Scherzer, Trey Turner deal. One of the top prospects in the league. I think he should show that down the stretch.
All right, Matt, how about you? Is there a game total that you're targeting?
Yeah, there's a pitching matchup here that I think will translate right into our DFS picks, where we have Jesus Luzardo facing Adbert Alzolay. And I think this is kind of just a slightly above average pitching matchup. But the total's 7.5, and that actually seems high to me. And it's mostly because of the lineups. The Cubs and Marlins were probably the two teams that traded the most of their actual good hitters at the deadline. I mean, there just is not a lot left from either of these offenses. And the Cubs' best remaining hitter is probably Wilson Contreras, just got put on the IL yesterday. So there just is not a lot of hitting talent on either of these teams right now. And you're going into probably the best pitching park in baseball in Miami. The Cubs have been giving up some runs lately, but that's been at home and it's been warm weather, wind blowing out of Wrigley, which is always a problem, and a much better offense in the Brewers than what they're going to see in the Marlins. So I think Alzolay can keep things under control. I think Luzardo potentially is the best pitcher on the slate, regardless of price. So yeah, I know I'm kind of jumping to that answer before we get there, but I do think that this could be a pitcher's duel. So 7.5 runs for this game, it seems like a lot for me.
Okay, yes. Moving on, we will transition to DFS. So for third base, I need a DFS pitcher that you want to roster tonight. Erik, we'll start with you.
Sounds like I might be taking Matt's answer here, but I've been a big Adbert Alzolay guy throughout the year. And he had a shaky, I think, end to the last month and his first start this month were both not great. But he bounced back with a very strong outing against the White Sox of all teams. Struck out 7, walked none, allowed just 2 earned runs in 6 2/3. So I think he's completely fine. And I'm confident in him going against one of the weaker lineups in the league, as Matt mentioned, at one of the most pitcher-friendly parks in the league. Alzolay on the season, 4.71 ERA, but both his xFIP and Sierra are just under 4. And I think that's the level we really should expect from him going forward. He's one of only 14 pitchers who've thrown at least 100 innings this season, who's been better than average in all 3 of strikeout rate, walk rate, and ground ball rate. He's not well above in any of those, but being good all around puts you in the company of guys like Corbin Burns, Zach Wheeler, Brandon Woodruff, Clayton Kershaw, and also apparently Joe Ross, who maybe I should look into a bit more. But I don't think he's Corbin Burns just yet, but I also think he's probably better than Joe Ross. So he's a guy I trust a lot at just 7,600. I think is a great price. And you could even pair him with my other guy, Patrick Sandoval, 7,100, and really spend up on hitters if you want.
All right, Matt, are you going with Adbert Alzolay as well? Did your buddy Erik steal your guy?
I don't think I'm going to pick him as my favorite GPP pitcher because I think the ownership on Alzolay and then especially on Luzardo will be a little bit out of control, where I think they're both fine plays, but rostering these two together might be a popular strategy. And then you could just pay up for, let's say, like the Red Sox or something, or the Rays. It'll be easy to fit offenses tonight with those two pitchers. So I kind of want to look elsewhere to someone else. I think Mike Minor for just a little bit less money at 6,400. That's just too low of a price for the quality of pitcher he is. So he's probably in the same category as guys like Luzardo and Alzolay, and he's right around what they cost. But I think the ownership on him will be much lower because he doesn't have this matchup in Miami against the Marlins or Cubs. He's facing the Cardinals at home, who are an average at best offense. And yes, they are better against left-handed pitching, but Tyler O'Neill has been out of the lineup. And even so, it's just not a great offense, even if they are better against lefties. So I think Minor is my favorite guy for GPPs, even though I think Luzardo and Alzolay are the safer choices.
All right, Paul, what do you think?
I give you one for low, one for medium, one for high price in this range today, Jesse. I made the case for Baumgartner earlier, so I'm not going to go through all that again. Just take him as a bargain price of $7,000 because of the matchup and his recent performance. I like him a lot tonight. I also look at the Astros versus Angels matchup as a high win probability game because of a depleted home lineup against a veteran pitcher, Zach Greinke, who has pitched around some long ball issues of late, but still allowed 3 or fewer runs in 7 of his last 8 starts. You aren't going to likely see him priced as low as $8,500 too often, in my opinion, despite what the other guys are saying. And if you look at the high price side of the slate, give me Robbie Ray in Seattle tonight for $9,200. All he's done over his last 10 starts is pitched to a 2.25 ERA, limiting opponents to 195 batting average, striking out 67 and walking 18 over that span.
All right, Matt, so you took Mike Minor as your pitcher. He's not pricey at 6,400. So are you paying up for a DFS hitter for your lineup?
Yeah, I want to avoid Boston and Tampa to some extent as the expensive teams, and maybe even Cleveland too. I think there should be a lot of ownership on those 3. So the team I'm looking at as the pivot is the Blue Jays. And I think Chris Flexen is a fine pitcher. He doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, but the appeal here is just that I think the Blue Jays go overlooked in an okay matchup, maybe a decent matchup. And they are a little more expensive than some of these other teams, but Vlad Guerrero Jr., 6,200. I mean, you don't really have to make too much of a case for Vlad on any given night. He's just an unbelievable hitter, probably the best hitter in the MLB right now. And I think his ownership will be in check. I think the Blue Jays in general as a stack will be moderately to low owned. So that's the team that I like the most at this point, with some other teams in their price range being probably a lot chalkier.
All right, Paul, where are you going for a DFS hitter?
I've got a couple for you. You have to like CJ Cron at $4,300 heading into tonight's action. There's not a hotter hitter of late, in my opinion. He has 8 hits in his last 19 at-bats, including 14 RBIs and 4 homers last week. Meanwhile, the pitcher's coming off the IL stint after being rocked in his last 4 starts. So I like that matchup. Then similarly, I like Louis Urias, who is in the middle of his own power surge with 3 homers and 8 ribbies, including in his last 10 for 18 streak over the last week. He'll cost you $4,000 as he faces Pirates starter Mitch Keller, who's been pretty awful in pitching to a 7.02 ERA in his last 10 starts. And guys have been talking about Adbert Alzolay. He's 0-8, maybe a lot of lack of run support, but also with a 5.90 ERA in his last 10 starts. He's facing Lewis Brinson. And this is a shocker for me. $2,000 price tag for a guy who's on an 11 for 21 streak, which includes 3 homers and 8 RBIs. Somebody's got to explain that one to me.
All right, Erik, a DFS hitter that you want in your lineup. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a bargain. The guy who's just at 2,800, although he performs like somebody about double that price when he's in the lineup, and that's Darren Ruff. He's just a part-time guy, occupies the short side of a platoon, but he's been mashing lefties. He's hit 3rd or 4th against the last 6 lefties the Giants have faced, including since Brandon Belt, his fellow first baseman, has returned to the lineup. He's still been in there. And actually, he's been having his kind of Eric Thames renaissance ever since coming back from KBO, not getting quite the same hype that Thames did. But he's hit 273, 381, 542, and now just over 300 plate appearances over the last 2 seasons after spending 3 years as a Samsung Lion. He's got a 1,028 OPS against lefties this season, and it's not just this year where he's been a lefty matcher. Over the course of his career, which includes some rather mediocre years in Philadelphia before he jumped overseas, he has just a 91 WRC plus against righties, which is why he never stuck around as an everyday player, but a 152 mark, so over 50% better than the average hitter against southpaws over the course of his career. You're not going to get a guy who hits lefties that well under 3,000. I know Austin Gomber's been fine this year, but he's not scary enough to keep me away from somebody who hits lefties as well as Ruff does.